Okay.
How did you know that you got a restriction? Like you knew before. All right. Bye, son. Hey, what you got? Come on. Huh? Did you throw it in the azaleas?
Can't forget the hat. Switch my chairs out here. All right. Let's see. What a show we have going on tonight. We're going to get into multiculturalism and how that is the death of culture by design. Not because multiculturalism is a bad thing, but because it was hijacked by the government and other powerful interest groups that wanted to use it to manipulate society and culture as a whole. So I'm not going to jump straight into that. What I would like to do is to update a little bit of the Charlie Kirk situation or the fallout from the Charlie Kirk assassination. Everything I see going on, my gut is still 100%. He was assassinated, and he was most likely assassinated by a professional. I do not believe that that 22-year-old boy made a 200-yard high stakes shot. Um, I've went over the science. I've talked to a lot of my friends in the military. I've talked to a lot of people that are just like avid long range shooters. I was like, just kind of help me think here. Am I being too facetious, or is that realistic? Like, could someone passionate enough figure it out? Blah 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 blah. And we just kind of looked at the science of it, of like going back to like how much time and effort that we put into being able to put long range rifles together and then put rounds down range, and how many rounds down range we had to put before we were ever somebody that could put rounds down range on target. And when I say on target, I mean I mean, shooting like a quarter at 200 yards, shooting a $50 at 200 yards, not with just one round, multiple rounds, groups. And there's a lot of time. There's a lot of time invested into just putting the rifle together that can do that. And then putting together the skill set. I mean, guys who shoot long range have tens of thousands of rounds downrange with the rifle. Guys who do it for a living, different things like that, they have hundreds of thousands, millions of rounds downrange. Skills aren't just acquired through training, or what's the way I can put this? It is acquired through training, but it's acquired through experience, which means you can't just sit in your living room with some of these devices and just dry firing your weapon and using laser dry fire devices on your weapon and different things like that, and then just like one day expect to walk out on a gun range and just be a tack driver. That's just not how it works. It's not like with everything else. You can't be a great football player unless you've went out and played football. And I mean games, like real games. You don't become a great football player by running laps, running drills, and everything else. Yes, that is a vital part of becoming a good football player. But the only way you become a good football player is being under the pressure and playing in real games with real stakes, with thousands of people watching. That's how you become good at anything. I used to be a professional BMX rider, and I traveled all over the country riding BMX. I traveled all over the country practicing at different skate parks, different setups, street riding, dirt jumps, everything. You never became a champion BMX rider by just riding one ramp in your backyard or one set of dirt jumps at your buddy's house. You became an extraordinary champion rider that could win first place in competitions by traveling around the world, practicing and training, and entering competitions and riding in actual competitions. It's the same thing with football, and it is the exact same thing when it comes to shooting. Most people who have never walked into the woods and shot a rifle at an animal will most likely miss the first time they ever do. Now, if they're young, it is a little bit different. As you're young, your brain is like a sponge. You're able to absorb information. You're able to listen. You're able to mimic. You're able to do a lot of things that make you very teachable and a lot easier to coach and to hopefully make you successful. When you are older, even 15, 16 years old, you start getting harder. When you are older than that, 20, 21, 25, 26, you become even harder. And the chances of, I worked with a lot of guides. I've helped guide people in hunts before. And the chances of you never being in the woods, never being behind the rifle scope in the woods, and an animal being in front of you and pulling the trigger, the chances of you doing it for your first time are very low. I know there's a lot of guys in here that, that can probably be like, yeah, he's right. There's a lot of guys that would probably be like, well, I have had a lot of first time shooters, do well. And they were probably in very beginner level situations when the shot took place. Everybody's experience is going to differ. Unfortunately, in Alabama, there is no such thing as easy hunting, not in the woods, not in the wild, not on WMAs or federal land. It is very hard to track. There are tons of other hunters out there, and the brush is very thick. It's very, very rare that you're going to get an easy shot in the Alabama wilderness. So, saying all of that, my chances or the chances of taking somebody who has never murdered somebody before, never shot a person, probably never shot an animal, has probably rarely hunted or been in the woods or, I can't confirm yay or nay on a lot of the alleged assassinator's history and his history with guns or hunting or anything else. But I'm going to put my money on the odds, and the odds say that it is extremely unlikely that he spent a lot of time in the woods being coached on how to hunt, how to shoot, how to properly stalk, and to make a long range shot on something that is living and moving and breathing, a moving target. If you go to the range and you shoot 200 yards and you're like, oh yeah, this is easy, anybody can do it, you have most likely never been in the woods before and tried to shoot an animal in a very uncomfortable position. I'm not saying that always happens. There are many times where you are put in a blind or a shooting house and you're there with someone very experienced and they know where the deer are walking through, where they're coming, how long they'll be there, and when it's time to take your best shot. All of the hard work is done for you, and all you do is point your rifle down range and pull the trigger. And you often have good success with that. That is not how the situation went on that fateful day that Charlie Kirk's life was taken from him by a shooter claiming to be 200 yards away, a young boy who did not spend a lot of time around guns or rifles or hunting in the woods. So the chances of that, now I'm not saying it's impossible. I hope I am proved wrong, that it was some just crazy lunatic who got his hands on a rifle that was apparently perfectly tuned, and all he did was crawl up there and got a lucky shot off under extreme adrenaline in a very uncomfortable position in front of thousands of people. I hope that is the case, and I hope I am proved wrong. But looking at everything to date that has come out about Charlie Kirk's assassination, being an avid long-range shooter myself, coaching avid gun enthusiasts and hunters and military, most of my life on how to zero a rifle, how to mount a scope, bore sight a rifle, zero in a rifle, and then how to calculate for calculations when it comes to windage, humidity, temperature, barrel twist, length of barrel, the type of bullet. A lot of people just don't know all of that about a gun. They think, oh, well, I could just buy a rifle at Walmart and throw a scope on it and it's going to shoot holes down range like a laser. And that's not how a gun works. There's not a gun that exists that can put one hole after another if a machine was shooting it. It's not how a gun works. That's not how a bullet works. The trajectory of a bullet. The trajectory of a bullet arches. Its arch is also based off of several factors. How hot is the barrel? How cold is the barrel? What is the humidity? What is the windage? If you had perfect everything across the board, the exact same, which is never the case, it is physically impossible. The physics do not exist. It is always changing. A bullet still cannot hit perfectly one after another. And a lot of people don't know that about long range shooting. A lot of people don't know that about weapons, about guns. They think it just shoots in a straight line perfectly every time. That's not how a bullet works. You may have a rifle that is the most expensive, perfect rifle that can put bullets one after another. But a bullet, it can't go one after another. It will not go in the same hole. Bullets fly different. They are imperfect. Even if you had a perfect rifle, which doesn't exist, your bullets are imperfect. That is why most long-range people will actually reload their own ammo. is because they have more of a chance of making it perfect than a manufacturer. And they will sit there and use extremely accurate scales and weights for the bullet, for the casing, and for the powder. It just went down on YouTube. I was going to try to get it back up, but I ain't going to worry about it. It is YouTube has failed. I just want everybody to know that YouTube has failed. They are the most terrible streaming platform ever. Anyway, so it does not exist. Bullets don't go right after one another. Even if you had a perfect rifle, all bullets are imperfect, and you're always fighting the imperfections of the bullet head itself. That's the actual trajectory that comes out of the barrel. You're fighting the casing and how perfectly it goes into the chamber, because every chamber, it sits slightly different. And then you're fighting the amount of powder in it, because you want the perfect amount every single time. It has to be the exact same every single time for it to shoot the exact same every single time. It does not happen. That's why they shoot in groups. That's what MOA is. Sub MOA rifles have to have sub MOA ammunition. You cannot take a Gucci rifle that is made for sub MOA shooting and put crappy, cheap steel case ammo in it and expect sub MOA results. That is not how shooting works. Anyways, getting way off into that. The bottom line is it takes a lot to create a rifle and the skill set and the precision to create just a rifle that can shoot that way. All right. A lot of experience, training, and history goes into setting up a rifle that can shoot 200 yards and take down an animal, even a hunting rifle. And it takes it even more time to train a person. So the idea that this kid just got a rifle and ran out there and shot somebody at 200 yards in a high stakes situation is severely, extremely, astronomically unlikely. That doesn't mean it's impossible. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope that he did take the shot. I hope it wasn't an intelligence community professional assassin that took the shot. I hope that intelligence communities did not train or give this kid a rifle. But if I had to put my money on something, the odds are looking like, even with everything we have to date, right? There's some very weird stuff coming out that I haven't spoke on yet because I'm waiting to see if more is going to come out about it. But, you know, Kash Patel and his weird statement about we have the watch now and I'll see you in Valhalla and different things like that is very weird and subliminal. The fact that Charlie Kirk had openly spoke in being an advocate for Epstein files to be released and criticizing the way the whole Epstein situation is unfolding days before he was killed. The fact that none of the rooftops were looked at. I've worked events. So I worked for over 7 years. I was in event marketing or experiential marketing. For those of you that don't know what that is where we travel the country for Fortune 500 companies and we set up events for them. So like Ford Motor Company, who has a booth at NASCAR. Well, it's not different. It's not Ford employees that come there from that local region and set that up. They actually hire an experiential marketing company, and those people travel to all the different NASCAR speedways and actually set that booth up and run it. Same thing when you see things set up at football games or you see things set up at marathons and different things like that, fairgrounds, all of that different stuff. That's what experiential marketing is. That is people that Fortune 500 companies that want to have a presence at an event, and they want it to be interactive. They want people to interact with the brand and they want them to have fun. So you'll set up games, you'll set up educational marketing, you'll set up collective marketing where you're actually collecting info, whether it's their interest in the brand or their email addresses or whatever that may be. And companies pay big money for people to do that. So I did that for about 7 years. I traveled all over the country. I probably see every major company, every major city 2 times a year. And I mean all of them: Chicago, LA, New York, Miami, Dallas, Houston, Denver, Seattle, you name it. I was everywhere multiple times a year. There were times where I flew. I think I would take 16 flights a month. That was my average, 16 flights a month. And whenever you work an event, the very first thing that is secured at any event, rooftops. All rooftop access in every building is closed for the event. Nobody is allowed to be up there. And law enforcement goes around and they check every single one. And then they are on a roof themselves or in a high elevation point in multiple different places. And you may not ever notice this, but they are constantly watching rooftops. They'll have teams on the ground watching rooftops. They'll have usually an elevated team, not always a rooftop team, but an elevated team. I know this because I've worked events and I've worked with them, and we had to adhere to their rules and regulations. And they are always, any elevated point they control, period, every event. There's never been an event that's not the case. Now, there have been maybe a handful of parades, like a lot of companies will have presence at different parades and large events, stuff like that, that they may not be able to situationally control or have eyes on every single rooftop for the miles that this parade spans or whatever it is. But when I say that they have control of the rooftops, I mean, that is, they have control of the rooftops, period. End of story. So the fact that this person had access to a roof, the rooftops were not controlled, and the fact that they weren't under constant surveillance. Now, I don't mean that someone was standing up there, law enforcement was standing up there watching that specific rooftop. I mean, you have people on the ground, especially your own security team, law enforcement, you name it. They are on the ground, and the number one thing they're looking at is rooftops and elevated positions and windows. The fact that somehow this slid by and no one noticed it, anything like that is, I mean, the odds are astronomical. It's like going all in on a full house before you flip your cards or see the flop and hitting a full house. The odds are astronomical. So we hope that that is not the case. Now let's talk about the fallout that has come from the Charlie Kirk assassination. That's just my general take. I want you guys to know. I hope I'm wrong. We will see it in the future. Do the odds stand with me more, or do they shift towards, more of a normal, like the official statement? I like to live on the very famous advice. I think it was John F. Kennedy, JFK, who said, never believe anything until it's been officially denied. And that resonates with me. And I've always so whatever the official statement is, you better believe that I'm looking for the holes in it. I'm looking for the other side. I'm looking for the evidence. Evidence points me to truth. Government and media does not point you to truth. Evidence and logic. And the other thing you have to look at is the practicality of it. How realistic is it? Who benefits from it? I am a major gun advocate. I've grown up my entire life shooting guns, competitively shooting guns, hunting, guide hunting, you name it. Anything done with guns, I've done it. And I am the first person when there is a mass shooting that creates a hysteria buy-off, or there is a mass legislation that is being pushed that creates a hysteria buy-off. What is a hysteria buy-off? That means that guys get scared that guns and ammo is going to get a lot harder to find, illegal to find, or really expensive. And they flock to stores to buy all the ammo and guns they can, much like what you saw normal people do to toilet paper during COVID. That's what gun guys do when they get scared. They go buy guns. They go buy ammo. If they think they suddenly aren't going to be able to get it, some guys just go buy it because they're like, well, crap, everybody else is going to buy it. I need to go buy some so I'll have some. And they're not even panic buying. They're just like, well, there's nothing on the shelves. Everybody else is buying it up. So if I get a chance to buy some, I'll buy some so I can go shoot. I don't think anything's going to happen. I think I'll still be able to get ammo. But, you know, everybody's buying it up. And it's like, man, I ain't going to be able to shoot. That just creates a snowball effect. One of the biggest ones we ever saw in this country was after Sally. Ammo shelves got bare. They would auction ammo off the truck at Bass Pro before it hit the shelves. And at most other gun stores. That's how bad it got. It got extremely hard to find any of the common rounds. And, you know, not a lot has changed. So we've had a lot has changed. It is obviously you can find ammo now. Ammo prices have significantly dropped. There's a lot of good things that have happened here recently. But since Sandy Hook, there has been several times where some event like that has taken place. The most recent one was COVID. COVID got extremely difficult to buy guns and ammo. Not that it wasn't available, but it got very expensive very fast, and the shelves were thin. You were not able to find a lot of exotic stuff. You got bare bones, bare minimal target rounds, and they were expensive, and you were limited. Academy has just lifted their ban, probably in the last 6 months. Academy just lifted their ammo ban of how much you were able to buy at one time. And that was from the COVID fallout. So anyways, my point being is that the hysteria buy-off in the gun industry always creates billions of dollars in profit for gun manufacturers and ammo manufacturers. That makes them the most beneficiaries, the biggest beneficiaries to these events, to these school shootings, to legislation being passed. Hysteria legislation. It's never going to pass. But if we can make gun owners believe that it's going to pass. Oh, we're outlawing AR-15s. There's a bill in the House right now. Everybody knows that's not going to happen. But then the media and everybody else starts selling it's 1990s again. They're going to have an assault weapons ban and blah, blah, this, blah, 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 that. You won't be able to buy one. You won't be able to get them. It's the end. Yeah. And then what does everybody do? They go buy a bunch of AR-15s. AR-15 manufacturers rake in billions in profit. Hundreds of millions, tens of millions. That makes them the biggest beneficiary of that hysteria legislation. Is it so hard to conceive that maybe a big billionaire CEO that sits at the top of these gun manufacturers and knows that, has a surplus in stock, wants to get rid of it, and he's like, all right, well, if I can get rid of 90% of it, I'll make, let's just say, $400 million. Well, it's going to cost me $100 million to have the bill written, to have some of these leftist politicians push it, and then to have a few media companies blow it up, scare everybody with it. So my net profit for a $100 million investment should be about $300 million. It's not hard to conceive. Following money is important when it comes to trying to understand the truth and to be burdened with the accountability of that truth. Truth is a burden. It is a hardship. That is where the phrase that ignorance is bliss comes from. And I'm not saying I've ever seen evidence one way or the other that was most likely. A lot of times during mass shootings, a lot of evidence is very hard to come by. It's very covered up. A lot of it never comes out, and most of the time it just kind of disappears and goes away. The Las Vegas shooting is a great example of that. They'll have you believe that some 60-year-old dude carried 2 tons of ammo and guns in suitcases through a parking lot, into a lobby, up an elevator and into his room, and then unloaded it all to commit that crime. And then he would shoot himself before the police got there. But then you have eyewitnesses on the ground that were like, oh, well, there were multiple shooters. We heard people shooting over here, people shooting over here, over here, over here, and it was full auto. And then you look at a few of the pictures of the room when the police got there that they took, that they released to the public. Not a lot of brass on the floor. There's and they're going to try to tell you that he did this with a bump stock. And it's like anybody who shot a bump stock knows that that is just, it's not how a bump stock works. You're not going to take a bump stock to a sniper's nest and spray into a crowd with it and do it very accurately. Anyways, but again, that story is just completely gone away. There were no questions to all there were no answers to a lot of the questions. The government never released a lot of the evidence, never released the findings of their investigation. I don't even think they ever had an official statement after the investigation concluded. So you don't get a lot of information after a mass shooting, especially a school shooting. A lot of times it's kind of pushed under the rug. I think a lot of people can say what happened with Uvalde. Oh, that was a mess. And what did the government do? They just pushed like, yeah, you should all hate the cops for what they did. And it's like there were never any answers. There's like, oh well, we prosecuted the police chief. He's under charges. And it's like that doesn't answer our question. That doesn't answer any of the questions. What about all the other officers that arrested moms and dads when they tried to go in the school to save their children? Why was the order ever given? They were just like, they try to point you in a different direction. A lot of the same thing is kind of happening with the Charlie Kirk situation. We will see. They'll let any of that information actually come out, and if we'll be able to make an assessment. But the point being is that you have to look for those three things if you want to actually discover the truth. It comes down to evidence. The government is not going to give you the truth. The media is not going to give you the truth. The only truth you will find is in your search for evidence, logic, practicality, and where does the money go? Who benefits from it the most? Okay, I'm going to stop there. We kind of got into that. I will say the fallout. Let me talk about the fallout for just a second, because you're seeing a lot of things now. You got Pam Bondi, who says hate speech isn't protected by the First Amendment, and that, well, she didn't say that, but she said the federal government's going to come after you if you commit hate speech. And it's like, hate speech is 100% protected by the First Amendment. The federal government does not have a right to come prosecute you or use force against you and your family or your property if you say something. That's just not that's not breaking a law. That's not how the Constitution works. That's not how government's supposed to work. The Bill of Rights, not the Constitution. Again, remember, we talked about 3 separate documents, not one. And the Bill of Rights doesn't grant rights. It restricts the government from being able to infringe upon those rights. The bottom line is that freedom of speech covers all speech. Yes, it covers hate speech, racist speech, sexist speech, and yes, it even covers threats. Just because you say, I'm going to rob a bank, you say, I'm going to harm somebody, that is not a crime. How many people walk around every day and think, I want to hurt that person? Someone who cut you off in traffic, skipped in front of you at the grocery store line, was being stupid, whatever it was. How many of you are like, man, I just want to smack you? Imagine if you could be prosecuted for that crime. We call that thought crime. You were thinking of committing a crime. That's what the book 1984 talks about. George Orwell's 1984 was that the government had a way to prosecute thought crime. It didn't stop at just speech. They were like, we were able to tell with facial recognition and body language and this and this and this that you thought about committing a crime. And we are allowed to prosecute that. That is why our founding fathers put freedom of speech in the Bill of Rights, and that it was protected. And the Bill of Rights was going to limit the government's ability to use force to enforce the speeches that they deemed they didn't like. Yes, you were allowed to say, I don't like my government. I want to overthrow my government. You're allowed to say, I want to kill this person. You're allowed to make threats. You're allowed to make hate speech. That is all covered under freedom of speech. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not responsibility and consequences for talking that way. That just means the federal government isn't allowed to send people to your house to shoot your dog and arrest you and kick down your door in the middle of the night. That's what that means. That doesn't mean that there's not consequences for being unclassy, disrespectful, insensitive. Most men everywhere were raised by their fathers or their mothers to have respect, which means when you go places, you can't just say something unclassy like, hey, you're ugly or you're fat or you're stupid, because that was disrespectful. And that would oftentimes land you with consequences. A lot of times that meant another man was going to walk up and punch you in the face. Freedom of speech has responsibility and consequences, but those consequences were never supposed to be dealt out by the federal government. The Bill of Rights was supposed to protect us from that, because if the federal government gets to decide what speech is okay and is not okay, well, they will always use that for more power and money for themselves and to protect themselves. So now suddenly someone like Trump is running, and it's like, oh, well, he said this, so we're arresting him. He's not allowed to run. He broke the law. And for you guys on the left, same thing. Oh, well, Kamala Harris is running again. Oh, well, she said this, and that's hate speech, and we've arrested her. That is the problem, is that you can use it to target your opposition and the people who disagree with you. That means you're no longer allowed to disagree. That's why you do not cheer, no matter how unclassy what a person says is. You never cheer for the government coming in and using force to punish them for what they said. Because whatever is used on your enemies today will be used on you tomorrow. There is no such thing as a free country who elects its leaders if those leaders are allowed to dictate what you can and can't say. That is why freedom of speech is the number one amendment on the Bill of Rights. It was considered one of the most important. And as our founding fathers said, the Second Amendment, the beautiful thing about the Second Amendment is that it protects the First Amendment, and you'll never need the Second Amendment unless they come for the First Amendment. You can look that up. I think it was Benjamin Franklin who said that. It might have been James Madison. I don't know. I think the actual quote was from a letter. And I think it was just stated that the beautiful thing about the Second Amendment was it will never be needed until they come for the first. Not if, until. Because it was only a matter of time. Our founding fathers did not think for a second that we would remain a free country and that people wouldn't come here and try to rule the population of America. They knew it would happen. It happened several times in their lifetime. The Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, it kept happening time and time again, and they knew it was going to continue to happen. That's why they made sure that there were laws in place that gave people the right to defend themselves against that. Not against criminals, petty thugs, and thieves. Not for hunting, no. They gave you rights and laws that enabled you to have the resources, right? Only you can dictate if you have the skills or the moral high ground. Only you. But they were able to give you the resources that if you decided to make that decision, that you had it. Because most people don't have that. Not that they haven't always found a way. You talk about what happened in Nepal in the last week. So the way the story actually went down was a bunch of young people were on a social media platform and they were using it to organize protests and things like that against the standing government. The standing government decided they didn't like that, and they were like, okay, we are going to geo-block social media. You're no longer allowed to have social media in the country of Nepal. Well, the people did not like that. They responded very negatively, so they organized anyways. They went to the prime minister's house. They dragged him out in his underwear and beat him. I think they actually ended up killing his wife, and then they burnt his house to the ground. And then they went to several other prominent political figures' homes and drugged them out of their homes, beat them, and burned their house down. And then they elected, over a social media platform, they elected a new prime minister. The general of the military recognized the faulty election, or whatever you want to call it. The government called it a faulty election, but no, it was an election by the people. We want to hold true and honest elections. Here we held elections. We choose this person to be our new prime minister. The military general recognized that as a legitimate elect, and he was meeting with the new elect for prime minister. And they are going to be arresting the rest of the political figures. So that's called a velvet revolution. It's very, very rare, but it's a revolution where the sitting government is abolished, new government is put into place, and it is done with almost no bloodshed, very little bloodshed. That's called a velvet revolution. That was not the case of the American Revolution. The American Revolution was an extremely bloody war, and many people died and lost their lives to give you the very freedoms that you take for granted today, and are so willing to throw at the government as a cost to stay safe, for them to keep you safe. All they have to do is manufacture an event like the Erna situation. That's the young Ukrainian girl that just got stabbed to death in North Carolina on public transport, or something like Charlie Kirk. If they manufacture something like that, you are begging to pay the cost of another freedom. Of like, what is another freedom I can give away? What do you want? Please tell me what you want. I'll give you anything. Just make me safe. And I would just ask, where is anybody safe? Where have our cities gotten safe? Where has our public transport gotten safe? Where do we not have to worry about drunk drivers? Because in everybody's head, they're just like, oh, well, if the government wasn't doing that, just like if the government wasn't all over the country killing people and kicking in doors and bombing countries, well, terrorists would just overrun our borders. And it's like, when has that ever happened? Ever. Any country. It hasn't. Matter of fact, we're more overran with terrorists and terrorist threats today, after all of the freedoms you gave away, the Patriot Act, the NDAA, all of it, everything you gave them, warrantless searches on the border, roadblocks, law enforcement having zero accountability, all of that. And it's like, you are more at risk for terrorism today than ever before. A great example, if you want to look at a comparable country, a comparable Christian nation that is a very industrial, revolutionized, first world country that is a Christian nation that is, I mean, they're a lot like America in a lot of ways when it comes to its populace, money, middle class, all of the things. Christian nation. And you look at them and you tell me how many terrorist attacks they have. But you know what they don't have? They do not have militarized police. They do not have police and amendments to the Constitution that allow federal law enforcement and military to conduct warrantless searches, and basically the abolishment of habeas corpus, the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, all of that. And they don't have terrorist attacks. Look them up. They're called Switzerland. You probably know it. You can look at it. They don't even have a recorded terrorist attack that ever took a life of native Switzerland on record today. But they're a first world country. They support Christianity. They support capitalism. They are a capitalist country, free market. All the things that our media and politicians will tell you that we are attacked by terrorists for. They are all of that. And they are closer to our enemies than we are. We are separated from our enemies by oceans. Oceans that take a day to fly over. A day. If you drove it, it would take you a week. If you're on boat, it takes you months. But they will have you believe that terrorists make that journey to attack you because you're white, Christian, and pro-free market, pro-capitalism. That's why they'll tell you that those terrorists want to kill you. But in Switzerland, they're pro-free market, pro-capitalism, white, and Christian. Never had a recorded terrorist attack on record. Why is that? It's because terrorists don't attack this country because you're Christian or because you're white or because you're a capitalist country. They attack this country because this country uses its military to go around and kill people and kill other cultures and hand power off to their enemies because their enemies were willing to be bought out by America. And that brings me right to, and I will do an episode on that. I can show you in a lot of ways that most countries, and this is evidence that's very researchable, most countries were invaded not because of something they did that was inhumane, blah, 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 because everybody does that. America is probably the most guilty of that. But they weren't invaded because some dictator did something that was inhumane. Most of the time when a country is invaded, it is because they no longer want to accept USD for oil. You can look up the petrodollar hypothesis if you want to understand more about that. Or they announce that they will be taking their currency back to a gold reserve and they will no longer participate in fiat currency such as the USD, the British pound, and other fractional banking and Federal Reserve banking institutions, that they want their resources to be bought with other resources, monetary resources that are actually measurable, like gold and silver and other rare earth minerals like diamonds and things like that, sapphires, things they mine for in Africa. And that they didn't want their country to be sold away for a fiat currency that some country just gets to print away and ruin the value of. They're like, our oil has value. Your money does not, or it does, but it could be worth a lot tomorrow. It could be worth very little. And at the rate that we are going, it says that your money is just on path to be worth very little, which means I sell you a $50 barrel of oil today, and that $50 buys me $50 worth of shit. But in 10 years, that $50 buys me $10 worth of shit. And now my $50 barrel of oil I sold you is suddenly worth $250. And they didn't want that. Gaddafi was a great example of that. Right after Gaddafi, that was the dictator of Libya, right before we invaded Libya, and they murdered him. He had announced that he was taking his country back to the gold standard, and he would no longer accept USD for barrels of oil out of Libya, which means that you had to purchase it via gold or other rare earth mineral. Now that brings me right into multiculturalism. Why is multiculturalism the death of culture? So, understanding what multiculturalism is. Multiculturalism is when you have the media, celebrities, and the government, and everybody saying that, you know, it's bad to be white, or that you have to accept black culture, or that if you don't like thugs walking around selling drugs, jobless, and trying to steal stuff, that you're racist. That's what multiculturalism is in the eyes of the government, in the eyes of media and extreme leftists. Multiculturalism is not that. Inherently, multiculturalism is good. Multiculturalism derived from coexist. Coexist means that we all exist together. We don't try to imprint ourselves, our culture, or our will or manners onto another culture, that they're allowed to exist on the planet as they are. Just like George Washington said, savages we call them because their manners differ from our own. So the idea of true multiculturalism was the idea that everybody left everybody alone. You're free to practice your own culture. And we are free to practice our own culture. And we don't fight and go to war over it. And we sure as hell don't go to each other's places and try to impose our culture onto yours, or say that parts of your culture clashes with ours and you shouldn't do it anymore. No, multiculturalism was the existence of multiple cultures on one landscape, in one country, on one continent. Today, multiculturalism has been hijacked by large corporate interest groups, very powerful people, the federal government, intelligence agencies, Fortune 500 CEOs, celebrities, Hollywood, religious groups, you name it. And the idea is to use multiculturalism to eradicate, erase, diminish all cultures everywhere, because they want one type of person in the world, and that is an obedient person. You are gray. You don't have special hair. You don't look special. There's nothing about you special. You don't practice nothing special. There's no tradition. There's no this. The only thing you have is you look the way we say you look. You dress the way we say you dress. You talk the way we say you talk. You practice the traditions we say you practice. And that's it. That's what they want. That is their idea of, they are using multiculturalism to get you to that point. And so they will go and tell Black African culture that white people hate you and they want to change you. They want you to be white. And then they'll sit here in America and tell white culture, you are racist if you don't want to do and be a part of Black culture or Hispanic culture or Asian culture. And the idea is that eventually we all hate each other. And when we hate each other, we fight. And when we fight, we need a referee. And so we look to the federal government to be the referee. And the referee is like, okay, y'all have a problem and we have a solution. They don't ever tell you, hey, we created y'all's problem. We made sure you fell for the multi-billion-dollar propaganda that puts you at each other's throats. They don't ever tell you that part. They tell you you had a problem because your cultures can't coexist, because white people are bad, because Black people are underdeveloped or undereducated or underfunded, whatever it may be. They will sit there and tell you it's a you problem, but we have a solution. And the solution is you don't get to be white anymore. The solution is you don't get to be Black anymore. You don't get to celebrate Black tradition. You don't get to celebrate white tradition. You celebrate the federal government's tradition. Only the tradition that the federal government says is okay, that they approve of, which inherently becomes the tradition that benefits them. Well, you don't celebrate Thanksgiving anymore. It's racist to Native Americans. And so the referee, the government, the federal government, they step in and they're like, okay, we don't celebrate Thanksgiving, but what we will celebrate is tax day. And that's the day that we take 100% taxes of your paycheck, not just a little bit. That's the day that we make everybody turn off their AC and their lights and their power. We cut them at the power plant. It's a tradition, and we all celebrate. It's a multicultural tradition. where you turn off all your power, or you give us all your money, or your kids come here and learn this thing. Learn how to make them sterile. Learn how to listen to your government. Take this vaccine, wear this mask. It's okay, yeah, it'll make you sterile. You won't be able to have kids, but that's okay. It's for the good of the planet. It's for multiculturalism. That is why embracing your culture, ignoring the nonsense, embracing other people's culture is so important. When I go somewhere, when I travel, like let's say I go to San Antonio or to Miami, I embrace the culture that's there. It's not my culture. My culture is backwoods Alabama. I was raised in Alabama in the woods by the wolves in the woods, not in the streets. And that is my culture. We eat Southern white food. We are strict Baptist Christians. Southern Baptist Christians. We hunt. We celebrate Christmas. We take time for our family and we raise animals. We listen to country music. We talk about being on farms. That is Alabama culture. We hunt ginseng. We fish. We drink beer. When I go to Miami, I don't go to Miami and do those things or expect to do those things. I go to Miami and I will drink tequila and margaritas, and I will embrace the Cuban music. Because most places you go down there are playing some type of salsa, Cuban music, or whatever in their restaurants, in their bars, in their clubs. And they usually make some of the best South Florida cocktails. And I will drink that, and I will embrace their music, I will embrace their dance style, and I will enjoy it. I don't go there and expect the bar to play Luke Bryan and everybody learn how to two-step and drink Miller Lite. So I want to do that. I do it in Alabama, and I love doing that, and that is my culture, and that's what I've been raised to do. That's what I enjoy doing. When I go somewhere else, I like to enjoy their culture, and I don't get offended when they're not doing what my culture does, or they do something that's against my culture. In my culture, we hold the door and we say, please and thank you. Excuse me. When I go somewhere else and their culture does not do that, I don't get mad at them for not doing that. I embrace it. I'm like, okay, we're moving along quickly and everybody's got somewhere to be and we do our thing. I don't go to New York and get mad like, oh, you guys are rude up here. It's like, no, we're not rude. It means if we take the time to be polite, we got to be at work at 8 o'clock and there's 100 people in our Starbucks at 7:45. There's 3 in your Starbucks at 7:45. You have the luxury to hold the door. How are you doing today? Weather's nice. Be polite. At the Starbucks in the middle of downtown New York City, there's 100 people trying to get their coffee in 15 minutes before they're late for work. They don't have time to be like, oh, can you pass the sugar? And the idea that you go from Southern Alabama to New York and get mad at somebody, well, they didn't say please or thank you or offer to pass the sugar, is absolutely absurd. And that is the death of culturalism. Go to New York, embrace their culture. Don't take your culture to New York, embrace theirs, or don't go. It's as simple as that. And that's what I believe about Alabama. If you don't want to come here and embrace our culture, then keep your ass where you're at. You don't have to come here and enjoy Alabama. But when you do come here, we have a certain culture and you should embrace it and enjoy it for your visit here. Don't fall into the death of culture. That is multiculturalism. Multiculturalism in its pure natural form, its grassroots form, was a very good thing. It was the idea that we coexisted and enjoyed each other's culture. That has been hijacked by powerful corporate interest groups that want to make you think that embracing other people's culture is deleting parts of your culture so that you both, deleting parts of both cultures so that you can have one culture that is the same. just like the feminism movement. Feminism at the heart, at its grassroots form, was a great thing. It was to encourage women to be reliant on themselves in a responsibility form of like, it is your responsibility to be physically fit, to be able to protect your children, to be able to fill the holes that a husband can't. The feminism movement has been hijacked by powerful corporate interest groups to get women involved in promiscuity, into being compartmentalized, to being isolated, alone. Why? Because they don't want families together. When you are a family, what are you? There is nothing more important than your family. Love and religion. It's the two things that the government and powerful corporate interest groups hate. When I say powerful corporate interest groups, I'm talking about people like the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, BlackRock, Vanguard, Blackstone, the Goldman Sachs, you name it. The four bankers and the chairman of the Senate who all sat at Jekyll Island in 1910 to come up with the Federal Reserve and taxes. That's what I'm talking about when I say powerful corporate interest groups. And it was the idea that they would take young women and instill in their heads that you can have a life of promiscuity and feel fulfillment from it. That you can say no to having children and being a wife and have fulfillment in it. That you can go work and have to grovel and enslave and obey a man at work instead of a man at home, and that you'll have fulfillment that way. That you can only rely on yourself and you'll have fulfillment that way. One of the darkest lies I've ever heard. And the true feminism movement was about empowering the woman in the family. It was about making women a part of the community in the roles that existed and giving them that voice to protect. Women are spiritual protectors. And the feminism movement was to capitalize and empower women in their roles. Give them the freedom of movement and voices they need to make the mother at home even more powerful. Feminism was hijacked and it was turned into the darkest evil we've ever seen, that puts the darkest perspectives into women's head. One perspective that I'm going to lay out an example here is the idea that you, as a strong individual feminine woman, can go sit on a public transport system in the middle of a downtown major metropolitan area that is crime ridden with giant black males that do not adhere to political spectrum. And what does that cost? What did that cost young Erna? 23-year-old young woman stabbed to death in the throat by a giant black man that was 3 times her size. And then she laid there bleeding out on the floor of that train while 4, 5, 6 other people watched her and paid no attention to her. The dark culture of telling a woman to go work her life away. Every man knows how dark that is because men have worked their entire life. Working a corporate job is the most degrading, debasing, ugly form of enslavement that men tolerate to provide for their family. You have no voice. You are not an individual. You are not unique. You are a robot that does not get sick, that does not take vacation, and feels bad if they have to be like, oh, you work 50 hours a week? Oh, well, I remember my first part-time job. That's how sick we are in the head as men. And we know, and now we've convinced women, feminism convinced women to go put up with that insanity. And they'll think that that is better than being at home, taking care of their man and their house and their children, providing the spiritual connective, the protective realm of the spirituality of not just a man, but of a family. One of the things government hates. The other is that religion. The other is that spirituality. Because the only thing that human beings today love and care and protect about more than government is their family and their religion. And that's why government hates it. That's why federal government is doing everything they can to get rid of it. Multiculturalism, you're not multiculturalism if you have a religion, because it doesn't fit with other people's religion. You want a family, you're sexist. You're not pro-feminism, because feminism, families are just a way to degrade and oppress women. That's what the federal government will tell you, because they want you to hate that. They don't want you to have a family. They want you to be a divorced couple with a kid that goes to a daycare, that's going to go to a college, that's going to indoctrinate them. Because then they own that kid, and you're not a family because the government is your family. You're not married. This woman just wants your money. This man has to live under the boot of paying child support and getting this kid twice a week, every other week. You hate each other. You're not a family. You beg the government to oppress the other one when you can. That's not being a family. Being a family means that you will protect your family over everything else, that they come first. And the government hates that, because the government knows that that means your family comes before them, what they say, and their will. If child services comes to take your child and you're separated and married to other people and do all these other different things, your level of resistance will be minimal. If Child Protective Services comes to a house with a strong, loving woman, with a strong man who leads his household, and a loving children that you have raised your own and homeschooled and taught moral and religious value to, your chances of resisting Child Protective Services are through the roof. Which means you are generally, as the head of your household, ready to lay your life on the line before you will allow federal agencies to take your child from you. You will get a lawyer. You'll stand at your front door. You'll refuse entry. You'll even rally a posse to come help you. You will do everything in your power. But when you have a kid with a girlfriend, with someone you're not even seeing anymore, with an accident, with this, with that, whatever feminism has given us, your level of resistance becomes real low. That is why multiculturalism is the death of culture. Because the federal government wants the culture to be federal government. Just like they want family to be feminism. Feminism is the death of family for one reason, one very specific reason. And it's because they don't want family. They want your family to be the federal government, which means we tell you what to do. We say what you can and can't do. We tell you what is right, what is moral, and you never question that. We come to your door. We ask for anything. We tell you anything. We immediately expect you to jump. You won't do that with family. You won't do that with religion. You won't do that with culture. People without culture will give their daughters away. Oh, it's our culture. We sell our daughters. I had a story the other day, and it was a 12-year-old girl, the youngest girl on the planet to give birth ever recorded. 12-year-old girl. She had been sold to a family and married to a grown man. And that's real easy to accept if you don't have a culture. I have a culture. And we don't marry children to men. We don't marry young girls to men. Not young, like women. I mean young girls, children. But if I didn't have a culture, that would probably be pretty easy for me to accept. And that is the result. That is the results that the federal government wants, is when they ask something ludicrous that goes against your culture. You don't have a culture, so it doesn't affect you. You don't have emotions, and you don't have ties. You're not passionate about resisting it. So remember, multiculturalism at its grassroots form was a good thing. It was coexist and embrace everybody's culture. Embrace your own, enjoy your own, protect it. Go embrace others, enjoy others, help them protect it. They should help you protect yours. That's multiculturalism. What the government calls multiculturalism today is not multiculturalism. Feminism, at its grassroots form, was to protect women, empower women's roles, not give them new ones. The idea of teaching young women that if your husband asks something of you, he's being oppressive, so you should leave him, divorce him, whatever, and then go to your job where a man asks you to do something even degrading who doesn't even care about you. The one man who loves you is going to take care of you, come old, young, sick, good health, bad health, who loves you through and through for who you are and will be with you the rest of your life and take care of you for the rest of your life. The idea, if he asks you something, is oppressive, but then some asshole at a job who doesn't care if you get sick and your mom dies, just don't miss work or you'll be fired and replaced and we won't even remember your name. That somehow that person asking you to do something isn't oppressive, but your husband is. And teaching young women that is not feminism. Feminism was empowering the roles that existed, not creating a new one and putting women in the dark role of a man. Men were meant to suffer the darkness of the planet and of the Industrial Revolution and of society. When something bad happens, when people have to work and it's dirty, men were supposed to do it. Whenever war came and it was bloody and dark, men were supposed to do it. Whenever keeping the peace was violent and dark, men were supposed to do it. We're never supposed to expose women to that darkness. The only reason the government and the feminist movement will have you exposing women, having women in military, having women in law enforcement, having women in the darkest realms of working man jobs and manufacturing plants and construction and everything else. The only reason they want women there is because it destroys what makes a woman, because they have a spiritual power and connection that they are scared of. Because if a woman embraces it and enlightens herself, she can literally change the face of the planet, the face of our industrial world, by inspiring men, by spiritually protecting men. And that's what the federal government doesn't want. And that is what feminism was supposed to create. It was supposed to explode women in a way that every man was going to be an army for their woman. And they were going to do great things. And the federal government didn't like that. They wouldn't have control over it. Reject it. Reject modern day femininity, feminism. Reject modern day multiculturalism. It is the death of our culture. It's the death of our families. It's the death of our religions. So I went a little bit over. I'm going to wrap up with that. We may or may not be doing a show tomorrow. So we have our big live coming up with, not our big live, our big event this weekend with Honor Tribe Outdoors. We have tons of veterans coming in, tons of other nonprofit organizations. Electromedics is going to be at this big event with their Rife machines. They're going to be doing, tutorials and letting people use them and showing them and all this different things. It's a really big event for Electromedics. If you guys are anywhere near Fairhope, Alabama on Sunday, please come by. Message me for details and the address. We would love to have you out. We're going to be eating barbecue. We're going to be skeet shooting. We're going to be doing raffles and all of this great stuff. It's just a really good time. Some of the greatest people you'll ever meet in the world come to this event. Veterans and veteran families, military families, you name it. It's just going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, Electromedics will be there with an Electromedics booth, a Rife booth. We'll be rifing. We'll be getting our frequencies in. And easy. Hey. It's going to be really cool. So we would love it if any of you guys would join us. Hopefully we'll be shooting some video from the event. That'll be on Sunday. Saturday, we are volunteering. We're helping cater to some of the families that have traveled in for this. We're going to be using our boat. I'll be a captain of a boat and I'll be taking some of the families out for the day while some of the veterans are offshore fishing, and I'll be taking the kids and the wives out for a little just inshore cruise, something, you know, that's real easy. People who get seasick, stuff like that. This is like just kind of cruising inshore. We'll stop by, get some drinks, swim on the beach, all of that stuff. And then, of course, Friday is just kind of everybody coming in on Friday. Everybody's getting together, having dinner, meeting everybody, getting ready, getting the itinerary ready for the weekend, stuff like that. So it's going to be a big weekend. We're really excited. So that said, I have a lot of work to do tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to get to do the podcast tomorrow. If I do, it may not be actual podcast. We may just have to kind of do a live and we'll talk a little bit, but we'll see. I'm going to try to get one out tomorrow. I'm going to try to do one. The rest of the weekend, we'll probably take Friday, Saturday, Sunday off and be back with you guys Monday. So you guys stay tuned. If there's an episode you guys want to hear something about, whether it's Rife machines, how to use Rife machines, current politics, geopolitics, I really wanted to talk about banking and financial infrastructure in the world. I wanted to talk about how it's degraded, how it's caused a lot of the degradation, how we are an industrial revolutionized country and our system relies on infinite growth, but we have finite resources. You know, it really kind of puts us coming to a head here soon and different things like that. So stay tuned. We got some really cool episodes coming up for you guys. Hopefully we have some really cool guests coming on here soon. Different doctors, chiropractors, surgeons that have used electromedics, Rife machines, and things like that they're really excited about. They've had really good results with. And, you know, it's just all about getting this technology to everybody in the world. So you guys stay tuned and see what we got coming next. We appreciate you guys being with us tonight.